What happens when a local cop tries to flex his authority on the wrong woman, only to find out she outranks him in every way? Welcome back to Dream Tale, where we bring you powerful stories that challenge perceptions and reveal the truth behind quiet faces. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because you never know when the next story might reflect something you've seen or lived through yourself. Here's a question for you. Have you ever judged someone too quickly, and then found out they could have turned your entire world upside down? That's exactly what happened on an ordinary afternoon in a small-town diner, where a quiet black woman sat alone, minding her business until a local police officer took one look at her and decided she didn't belong. He didn't know who she was. Didn't know why she was really there. All he saw were assumptions. And those assumptions led him to humiliate her in public, call her a threat, and even summon backup. But the moment he tried to push her too far, she pulled out her badge. Because the woman he tried to intimidate wasn't just anyone. She was U.S. Marshal Danielle Lewis, a federal officer working undercover, assigned to take down someone much bigger than him. Someone sitting just a few tables away. His own boss. The town's corrupt police chief. This isn't just a story about justice. It's a story about perception, power, and the moment the tables turn. It's about how dangerous bias can be, and how sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. So buckle up. Because what started as public humiliation turned into a public takedown. And the people who judged her? They didn't see it coming. Let's dive into the true story of what happens when abuse of power meets unexpected authority, and a cop learns the hard way that not everyone is who they appear to be. This is Dream Tale. It was a warm Tuesday afternoon when Danielle Lewis stepped into Millstone Diner, a small-town restaurant tucked off the highway, known more for gossip than gourmet meals. The clink of cutlery, the hum of conversations, and the smell of frying oil greeted her like any other patron. But the moment she walked in, it was like the air shifted. She wasn't loud. She wasn't aggressive. She didn't demand attention. But she got it anyway. Danielle was dressed simply, dark jeans, a fitted blazer, and a modest blouse. No makeup, hair pulled back in a bun, nothing flashy. But she had that quiet poise that made people take a second glance, even if they didn't know why. She scanned the room briefly and walked toward a small booth in the back. Calm, controlled, intentional. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman having lunch alone. Maybe a schoolteacher. Maybe a government clerk. But no one knew they were watching a U.S. Marshal. She placed her order with the young waitress, a coffee, scrambled eggs, dry toast. No fuss. No eye contact. She didn't come here to make friends. But Danielle wasn't just there to eat. She had arrived 2 days earlier, staying in a motel under an alias. Her mission? To quietly observe the subject of a 6-month federal investigation. Someone she had been tracking for weeks. Someone suspected of corruption, racketeering, and abuse of office. That someone was Police Chief Raymond Dobson, the highest-ranking officer in the county and, according to Danielle's intel, a man who had abused his badge for years without consequence. Her job was to watch, wait, and strike only when the moment was right. And Chief Dobson? He was sitting just 4 booths away, sipping black coffee, smiling like a man with nothing to hide. Danielle didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She already had his patterns memorized. His lunch hours, the officers he met here, the cash payments disguised as tips, the conversations she had bugged days earlier. This diner wasn't just a pit stop for Dobson. It was a power post, a place where he conducted business out in the open, believing no one would ever dare challenge him. Danielle sipped her coffee slowly, watching the room through the reflection in the window. She had done this dozens of times. Blend in. Be invisible. Until the moment came to act. But what she didn't expect, what caught her completely off guard, was that someone else would challenge her first. Someone who saw her, and assumed the worst. And that's where everything started to unravel. The front door jingled as Officer Kent entered the diner, whistling and nodding at the hostess like he owned the place. He wasn't on duty, his badge wasn't clipped to his belt, but everyone knew who he was. Kent was one of those small-town cops who thrived on being recognized. He loved the nods, the smiles, the way people lowered their voices when he walked by. And he noticed Danielle instantly. He paused for half a second, eyes narrowing. He didn't know her face. She wasn't one of the regulars. She wasn't from around here. He glanced around. Chief Dobson, his boss, was seated near the front, chatting with a local business owner like nothing in the world could touch him. But Kent's attention kept drifting back to the woman in the corner. She was composed. So focused. Too focused, he thought. Danielle felt the change in energy. Years in law enforcement had sharpened her instincts to a razor's edge. She didn't even need to look up to know she was being watched. Kent made his way over slowly, pretending to check his phone. Then he stepped close to her table. "You waiting on someone?" he asked, voice casual but probing. Danielle looked up politely. "No. Just having breakfast. You from around here?" She took a calm sip of coffee. "Just passing through." Kent shifted his weight. He didn't like her tone. Too steady. Too confident. "This booth is usually reserved. Locals like to sit back here," he said, fishing for a reaction. Danielle gave a polite smile. "Didn't see a sign." He lingered. "Too long. Mind showing me some ID?" he asked finally, trying to sound casual, but there was an edge underneath. A challenge. Danielle raised an eyebrow. "Am I being detained?" That stopped him. Just for a second. But the pause irritated him more than it should have. "No, just doing my job," he said stiffly. "We've had a few strangers coming through lately. You can't be too careful." Danielle leaned back. "You always ask women eating toast for identification?" That stung. A few people nearby had turned their heads. Kent's jaw tightened. "I'm just making sure you're not a problem, ma'am. These are tense times." Danielle glanced past him, to Chief Dobson, still chatting, still pretending not to notice. She had no doubt Kent was acting on his own. This wasn't part of the op. It was prejudice, plain and simple. "I'm not the problem," she said softly. But Kent didn't hear the warning in her voice. He took her calmness as weakness. As resistance. He turned toward the front, pulling out his phone. "Dispatch, this is Kent. I've got a non-compliant female, possible suspicious activity. Requesting backup." And just like that, Danielle's cover was about to be blown. Not by her target. Not by a suspect. But by a man in uniform who couldn't see past his own assumptions. Within minutes, the quiet atmosphere of the diner shifted. 2 more patrol officers walked through the door, eyes scanning until they locked on Danielle. She hadn't moved. The young waitress who had served her earlier stood frozen behind the counter, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. A few customers whispered to each other, while others started pulling out their phones. Officer Kent stood in front of Danielle's booth like a guard dog, his arms crossed as the other 2 approached. One of them, Officer Ramirez, looked hesitant. "What's going on?" Ramirez asked Kent under his breath. "She's acting weird. Won't show ID. I think she might be casing the place or something worse," Kent replied, just loud enough for people nearby to hear. Danielle closed her eyes for half a second. This wasn't part of the plan. Her training had taught her to expect chaos, but this kind of chaos, born from ego and ignorance, was the most dangerous kind. "I'm giving you one more chance to comply," Kent barked. Danielle slowly reached into her inside jacket pocket. She knew this could go one of 2 ways. She could shut this down now or let it play out. But she also knew the second she revealed her badge she would compromise her position. So she made a choice. She waited. "I'm not breaking any laws," she said firmly. "I've done nothing wrong. I ordered food, paid for it, and I'm sitting in a public place." Kent scoffed. "That's not how this works. If you make people uncomfortable, that's a problem. You're making me uncomfortable." The irony burned. A black woman quietly eating breakfast was suddenly a threat. The other patrons started murmuring louder. Some looked uneasy. Others looked entertained. Danielle sat still, her voice calm but steel-edged. "Is this how your department operates? Harassing citizens for having breakfast?" Kent leaned in, lowering his voice. "Lady, I don't know who you think you are, but if you don't stand up and show some respect, I'm going to have to escort you out." "And what exactly am I being accused of?" Kent grinned slightly. "Being uncooperative. Acting suspicious. That's enough." She held his gaze. "You sure you want to go down this road?" That's when Chief Dobson finally stood from his booth. He walked over, feigning surprise. "What's the issue here, Kent?" he asked with theatrical concern. She refused to identify herself. "I think she's a threat." Dobson turned to Danielle, giving her a patronizing smile. "Ma'am, maybe you should just step outside. We don't want this to escalate." Danielle took a deep breath. And that was the moment. She reached into her jacket slowly, carefully, then placed her badge and ID on the table for everyone to see. U.S. Marshal. The diner went silent. Kent's face went pale. Dobson took a step back. The moment of power shifted like a wave crashing over them. Danielle stood. This operation is no longer quiet. The golden shimmer of Danielle's badge gleamed under the overhead lights like a blade unsheathed. "U.S. Marshal Danielle Lewis," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "And you," she turned to Kent, who was now sweating bullets, are dangerously close to obstructing a federal investigation. The silence was so thick you could hear a fork drop. The waitress behind the counter gasped. A man near the window whispered, "Oh my God," and quickly started recording. Chief Dobson's expression had gone from smug to stone cold. But Danielle didn't flinch. She had all eyes on her now, and for the first time that was the point. "I am here under federal authorization," she said clearly, "tracking internal corruption within this county's law enforcement. And you, Officer Kent, have just created a civil rights violation for your department." Kent took a step back, his voice breaking. "I didn't know. I thought you." "You thought what?" she snapped. "That a quiet black woman in a diner was dangerous? That I didn't belong here? That I couldn't possibly be someone with more authority than you?" Dobson tried to step in. "Danielle, Marshall Lewis, let's be reasonable." "No," she interrupted sharply. "You've had plenty of time to be reasonable, Chief. And frankly, it's over." She reached into her inner pocket again and produced an envelope. Seal. Stamp. A federal arrest warrant. "For Raymond Dobson," she said, turning to the man who had run this town like his own kingdom for over a decade. "On charges of obstruction of justice, conspiracy, abuse of power, and accepting bribes from known criminals." Gasps rippled through the room. Even the officers behind Kent looked stunned. Dobson laughed nervously. "You're kidding. You're kidding, right?" But Danielle didn't blink. She handed the warrant to Officer Ramirez. "You will execute this arrest," she ordered calmly. "Now. On the spot. If you don't, I'll have the FBI down here in 10 minutes, and everyone in this room will be wearing handcuffs." Ramirez looked at Dobson, then at the warrant. He didn't hesitate. The cuffs came out. The restaurant watched in stunned silence as Chief Dobson, the man who once walked in like a king, was handcuffed like any other suspect and read his rights. Kent stood frozen. His hands shook. His mouth moved but no words came out. Danielle turned to him. "You better hope this wasn't your last mistake in uniform." Then she faced the diner. "For those who watched this unfold," she said to everyone, "I want you to remember, justice doesn't wear one face. And authority isn't proven by how loud you are, but by how you protect those who can't protect themselves." Then, slowly she picked up her bag, tucked her badge back into her jacket and walked out. The door jingled softly behind her. By the time Danielle was 2 blocks away from the diner, the video was already on social media. The footage, captured by a teenager at a corner table, showed the entire exchange: Officer Kent's aggression, Chief Dobson's condescension, and Danielle's steady, unflinching authority. It was posted with a simple caption. She wasn't a threat. She was the law. Within an hour it had over 50,000 views. By the end of the day it was on national news. Back in the small town, reactions were split. Some locals were horrified. They had trusted Chief Dobson for years. He coached football, attended town fairs, and shook hands like a man of the people. But now they saw what had been hiding beneath that smile. Others felt vindicated. People who had once complained about racial profiling, about mysterious disappearances of evidence, about being dismissed when reporting crime, finally felt like someone had listened. Danielle had left the town quietly, not seeking thanks or praise. But her actions set off a chain reaction. Within 48 hours, the mayor called an emergency press conference, announcing that an interim chief would be appointed. The town council promised an internal review of hiring and conduct within the police department. The governor's office released a statement calling Danielle's actions a model of integrity and discipline. Civil rights organizations praised her restraint in the face of open discrimination. News anchors replayed the video again and again, pointing out the poise she maintained under pressure. But perhaps the most powerful impact came from the ordinary people. A black mother in the town wrote on Facebook, "For the first time I told my daughter a story about a black woman who walked into danger, not just to survive it but to fix it." Danielle Lewis made her feel powerful. And safe. At the same time, the officer who had cuffed Dobson, Ramirez, was seen differently now. Some had thought him a quiet follower, but his decision to uphold the law, even against his superior, was viewed as an act of courage. A local reporter interviewed him and his quotes spread like wildfire. "That day I didn't follow orders. I followed justice." As for Kent, he was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. It turned out Danielle's body cam, active even during breakfast, had captured every word, every threat, every assumption. His career wasn't just in jeopardy, it was a case study in what not to do. Across the nation, conversations sparked in diners, living rooms, and courtrooms. What started as one moment of bias in a quiet restaurant had become a nationwide reckoning. Not because Danielle raised her voice, but because she stood her ground. And because the truth had walked in quietly, and then left, unshaken. In the days that followed, Officer Kent's name was splashed across headlines, but not for reasons he'd ever imagined. Internal Affairs launched a formal investigation. The footage from both the diner and Danielle's body camera was reviewed frame by frame. Every pause, every word, every glare and veiled threat he delivered was now being dissected publicly. The findings were clear: racial profiling, excessive escalation, failure to verify identity before initiating conflict, and an overt abuse of authority. By the end of the week, Kent was suspended indefinitely without pay pending disciplinary action. But the damage was already done, both to his career and reputation. Protests formed outside the precinct. Not large but loud. Residents, many of whom had once feared retaliation for speaking out, now held signs that read, "Justice isn't selective. We stand with Danielle. Silence equals complicity." A local news anchor confronted Kent outside his home one morning. "Officer Kent, any regrets about how you handled the incident at the diner?" Kent avoided the camera. No comment. But behind closed doors he was unraveling. He called a union lawyer. He begged for his record to be protected. He blamed the situation on a misunderstanding, claiming he had acted with caution in a time of tension. But public sentiment was unyielding. A statement released by the U.S. Marshal's Office made things worse. "Our agents do not wear uniforms for recognition. They wear integrity for protection." What Officer Kent displayed that morning was not caution, it was ego. Pressure mounted for the department to act swiftly. The mayor made a public appearance insisting on zero tolerance for profiling and abuse. The town council announced plans for mandatory bias training and new complaint channels for civilians. Then came the personal fallout. Kent's own brother, a teacher at a nearby school, wrote a post on social media. "It's hard to admit when your own family disappoints you. But accountability starts at home. And my brother was wrong." That post went viral. In a last-ditch effort to salvage what little dignity he had, Kent agreed to a private interview. "I didn't mean to cause harm," he said. "I was doing what I thought was best at the moment. Maybe I judged too quickly." But apologies didn't erase the fact that he had turned a peaceful morning into a potential tragedy, just because someone didn't look like they belonged in his world. In the end, he wasn't fired publicly, but he resigned quietly days later. No fanfare. No final salute. Just a man walking out of a job he no longer deserved, watched by the same eyes that had once trusted him, and now saw him clearly. Justice hadn't shouted. It had simply done what it always should. Held the wrong people accountable. Danielle never returned to that small town. But her impact echoed through every street, every precinct hallway, and every late-night conversation in local homes. The town had been shaken, but sometimes a storm clears the sky. The new interim police chief, a soft-spoken woman named Carla Jennings, took office just 2 weeks after Dobson's arrest. One of her first acts was to request a full audit of complaints filed over the past 5 years. Many of them had previously been dismissed without investigation, especially those filed by minorities. Now each one was being reopened. Community meetings were organized. People, especially Black and brown residents, finally stood up without fear. They told their stories, shared experiences, named names. Some wept. Others shouted. But for the first time they were being heard. Carla made changes. Officers were required to undergo quarterly de-escalation and racial bias training. A civilian oversight board was created, with rotating members from different neighborhoods. And the town council passed a policy mandating all local police to wear body cams that could not be turned off manually. All because one woman refused to stay quiet in a booth at a diner. Meanwhile, Danielle continued her work with the U.S. Marshals Service, moving from case to case, always under the radar, never seeking the spotlight. But word spread. She became something of a legend in law enforcement circles, not just for her competence but for her composure. Other officers began to use her footage as a training example. How to lead without shouting, how to dismantle bigotry with facts, how to disarm prejudice with presence. She received letters, emails, and handwritten cards, some from young Black girls who now wanted to grow up to be like her. One message stood out the most. It came from an older woman in that very town. "I'm white. I never thought about how different things were for someone who looked like you. But watching how you handled that moment, it changed me. I see now. Thank you." Danielle read the letter once, folded it gently, and kept it in her desk drawer. She didn't need awards. She didn't need recognition. She just needed to know the job had been done right, and that it meant something. Back in the town, that once divisive diner was now a different place too. The owner replaced the booth where it all happened with a plaque that read, "Here, Justice sat quietly and stood tall." Locals came in just to see it. Some took pictures. Some just stared. And every so often someone new would ask what it meant. And the town would tell them. Not with anger. Not with shame. But with a quiet kind of pride. Because once, a woman walked in and reminded them that justice didn't come wrapped in a uniform. Sometimes it came wrapped in scars and strength. Sometimes the most powerful moments don't happen in a courtroom or on a stage. Sometimes they happen in the quiet corner of a diner, when someone decides not to back down. Danielle Lewis didn't come to that small town looking for a confrontation. She came to do her job. But when prejudice tried to corner her, she stood her ground, not with force but with truth. Not with volume but with grace and resolve. Her scars didn't make her less capable. They made her more human, more courageous, more real. She reminded the world that being black, being a woman, and even bearing visible wounds doesn't mean weakness. In fact, it can mean power. Officer Kent learned the hard way that assumptions based on appearances are a fast road to disgrace. Chief Dobson learned that no uniform can hide corruption forever. But the town? It learned that silence is dangerous, and that change begins when good people start paying attention. So, what will you do the next time you witness injustice? Will you look away? Or will you speak up? Because real justice isn't loud. It doesn't always wear a badge. And it doesn't need permission to walk through the front door. It just needs someone brave enough to carry it. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes or made you think twice, then help us share it. Backhand index pointing right, like this video to show your support for justice and dignity. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe to Dream Tale for more powerful, emotional stories that challenge stereotypes and inspire change. Backhand index pointing right, comment below. What would you have done in Danielle's shoes? Or, have you ever been judged unfairly? Tell us your story, we read every comment. Backhand index pointing right, share this story with your friends and family. Let them see what courage really looks like. At Dream Tale, we believe that every voice matters. That behind every headline is a human story. And that sometimes, the quietest people are carrying the loudest truths. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and never underestimate the strength of someone who's been through the fire and came out still standing. Because those are the ones who change the world.